Hello there. It's good to have someone to talk to, even if it's just through this screen. My name is Robert Johnson, and I'm pushing 83 years old now. Still kicking, though some days it feels like that's all I'm doing, just kicking against a current that's always trying to pull you under. I'm sitting here on my old porch swing, the one Martha and I picked out more than 50 years ago. It creaks like my old bones, but it's familiar. A steady rhythm in a life that's seen its share of unsteady moments. It's a cool morning, the kind that makes you think, the air crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of a new day. Though for an old man like me, each new day is a gift I don't take for granted anymore. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, a whole lot. What I'm about to tell you, and it's a story that's been locked away inside me for a long time, a heavy stone in my gut. It's a story about family, the kind of bond you think is unbreakable. It's about trust, the kind you give freely, especially to your own. And it's about how quickly both of those precious things can shatter into a million pieces, leaving you standing in the wreckage, wondering how you'll ever pick them up. It's about a betrayal so deep, so personal, it nearly broke me in body and spirit. It stole my dignity, it stole my savings, every last cent I'd worked my entire life for, and it left me in a place no human being should ever find themselves, choosing between a hot meal and the pills that kept my old heart ticking. Imagine that, if you can. Standing in a pharmacy, the coins in your pocket barely enough for one or the other, and the life you built crumbling around you. My own flesh and blood, my grandson nearly put me in an early grave, not with a weapon you can see, not with a fist or a gun, but with a pen and a lie and a smile as he did it. Maybe it's because at my age, you don't have much time left for secrets. They say the truth will set you free, and Lord knows I've carried this burden long enough. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because if someone out there, listening to my old voice rambling on, is going through something similar, something that makes them feel ashamed and alone, then maybe my story, as painful as it is to tell, might give them a sliver of hope. Or at least, it might let them know they're not the only one, that these terrible things, they happen. And sometimes you can find a way through them. And honestly, I need to get it out. It's been a weight on my chest for too long, a cold, hard knot that tightens whenever I think about it. Talking about it, maybe it's like lancing a wound, painful, but necessary for the healing to truly begin, even after all this time. Before I dive into the deep end of this, and believe me, it gets deep, darker than a well at midnight. If you're new here to this channel, or if you just feel like it, maybe hit that subscribe button. They tell me it helps these stories reach more folks, helps them travel further than an old man on a porch swing could ever manage alone. And Lord knows, some stories need to be heard, if only to serve as a warning or a comfort. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from too, if you'd be so kind. It's a strange thing talking into the quiet like this, but it's nice to imagine who's out there on the other side of these words. It makes the world feel a little smaller, a little less lonely. I grew up in simpler times, or so they say. The late 1940s, early 1950s. That was my era, my beginning. My hometown was Oak Ridge, a small town nestled in a valley that wasn't much to look at if you were just passing through, but it was everything to us who lived there. Dust roads in summer that coated everything in a fine brown powder, turning into muddy tracks in winter that could swallow a car tire whole if you weren't careful. Everybody knew everyone, or at least they thought they did. You knew who was feuding with whom, whose chickens laid the best eggs, whose husband drank a little too much on a Saturday night. News traveled faster than the mailman. Back then, children were mostly to be seen and not heard, especially around adults. Respect your elders, work hard, don't complain, go to church on Sunday, and mind your own business unless directly asked. That was the unwritten code, the mantra we all lived by. It shaped us, for better or worse. It taught us resilience, I suppose, but maybe it also taught us to keep our troubles to ourselves, to not burden others. A lesson that would come back to haunt me years later. My father, Thomas Johnson, was a stern man, a farmer. His hands were like gnarled oak branches, calloused and strong from wrestling a living out of unforgiving soil. He worked himself to the bone from before sunup till after sundown. Words didn't come easy to him, not the soft ones anyway. His approval was a rare commodity, usually shown in a gruff nod or an extra helping of potatoes at supper. My mother, bless her soul, Her name was Eleanor. She was the quiet one, gentle as a summer breeze, but underneath that gentleness was a resilience, a core of steel you wouldn't expect. She was the glue that held our little family together, patching up scraped knees and hurt feelings with equal care. She could make a feast out of next to nothing, and her smile, though infrequent, could light up a room. I had a sister, Mary, 2 years younger than me. We were close as siblings could be back then, sharing secrets and chores, and the occasional blame for some misdeed to shield the other from Pa's temper. She was a giggly thing, always seeing the bright side, a contrast to my more serious nature. We weren't a family for big displays of affection. Hugs were rare, con I love yous even rarer, practically unheard of. Love was shown in actions, not words. It was in the hot meal on the table every night, no matter how lean the times. It was in a mended pair of trousers, patched so neatly you could barely see the tear. It was in the unwavering expectation that you would do your duty, fulfill your responsibilities. Those were the big words in our household: duty, responsibility, honesty, hard work. There was a strictness, an undeniable rigidity to our upbringing, but there was also a sense of security, for a while at least. You knew your place. You knew what was expected. There was a certainty to life, a predictability that I find myself missing sometimes in this chaotic modern world. Life wasn't easy, not by a long shot. We saw hard times, lean years when the crops failed or the prices bottomed out. The Great Depression, though officially over, still cast a long, hungry shadow over many families in Oak Ridge when I was a boy. I learned early on the value of $1, learned it the hard way, watching my parents count out pennies for flour and sugar. I learned the profound importance of saving for a rainy day, because in our life, rainy days were frequent and often torrential. My father drilled that into me. "A man provides, Robert," he'd say, his voice rough as sandpaper. "A man is prepared. He doesn't rely on handouts. He stands on his own 2 feet, and he saves. For his family, for the future, for the unexpected. Never forget that." Those words, they echoed in my head my whole life, became a part of my very fiber. Maybe that's where my vulnerability started. Looking back with the dubious wisdom of old age, this fierce independence he instilled, this deeply ingrained belief that I had to handle everything myself, save for everything, be the strong one, the provider, the rock. It made me a good husband, a good father, a reliable man, but maybe, just maybe, it also made me a target later on. Perhaps that very self-reliance, that reluctance to ever admit I needed help or couldn't manage, made me blind to the wolves that sometimes come dressed in sheep's clothing, even sheep from your own flock. Childhood had its moments of light, of course, even in the shadow of hard work. Fishing in Miller's Creek with a willow branch for a rod and a bent pin for a hook. The thrill of a small, wiggling trout on the line. Stealing green apples from Old Man Hemlock's orchard. The tartness making your mouth pucker, and the subsequent bellyache that was almost worth it. The simple joys, the uncomplicated pleasures of being young and alive, before life got, well, complicated. Before the world showed its harsher side, I left Oak Ridge for a while, like many young men of my generation, served my country, did my duty. It changed me, as it does any young man, showed me a world bigger and often crueler than our little valley. When I came back, I was different, quieter perhaps, more observant and ready to settle down to build something of my own. That's when I met Martha Miller. She was a school teacher, smart as a whip, with a laugh that could charm the birds from the trees and eyes that saw right through you, in the kindest way. She was, without a doubt, the best thing that ever happened to me. We married, started a life together. We built it slowly, brick by brick, with love and hard work and a shared dream of a peaceful future. We bought this little house, the one I'm still in, though it feels emptier now. We planted a garden, watched it grow. A good, honest life. That's all we wanted. We had one child, our Sarah, our precious daughter. She was a bright spark from the moment she was born, full of life, full of questions, full of laughter. She had Martha's intelligence and, I like to think, a bit of my stubbornness. She was our world, the center of our universe. We poured all our hopes and dreams into her, wanted her to have all the opportunities we never did. We taught her the same values we'd been raised on: Honesty, hard work, kindness. We thought we were preparing her for the world, and in many ways we were. But you can never prepare for everything, can you? You can't foresee the turns life will take, the sorrows that might lie in wait. Sarah grew up, went off to college, met a young man, got married. All the things you hope for your children. She moved a few states away, started her own family. And then came Kevin, my grandson, Sarah's boy. Martha passed away about 10 years before all this trouble with Kevin really began. Cancer. It took her slowly, painfully. Holding her hand as she slipped away, that was the hardest thing I'd ever done up to that point. It left a hole in my life, a vast, echoing emptiness that nothing seemed to fill. The house felt too big, too quiet. The silence was deafening. Sarah, bless her heart, lived a few states away, busy with her own life and her own family. She'd call irregular as clockwork, visit when she could manage the trip. Her calls were a lifeline. And then there was Kevin. Kevin, he was Sarah's boy, her firstborn. As a child, he was a sweet kid, a little mischievous, but what boy isn't? He spent summers with us sometimes, Martha doting on him, baking him cookies, letting him get away with things I never would have. As he got older, he became adrift. That's the best word for it. He never could seem to find his footing, his direction in life. Dropped out of community college after a semester or two, bounced between low-paying jobs, never staying anywhere long. He was restless, always looking for the next easy thing, the quick fix. But he was charming, Wes. Oh yes, he had charm to burn when he wanted to use it. Had a way with words, a smile that could coax a bird out of a tree. Martha always had a soft spot for him, saw the good in him, even when it was buried deep. And maybe I did too, more than I should have. He was Sarah's son, after all. My only grandson. You want to believe the best of your own. He started visiting me more often after Martha died. Said he was worried about his old granddad, all alone in that big house. Said he wanted to help out. At first, it was small things, little gestures. He'd mow the lawn, though usually only after I'd asked him 3 times and offered him $20 for his trouble. He'd offer to run to the store for me. "Grandpa," he'd say, flashing that easy grin, "can you lend me 20 for gas? I'm a bit short till payday." Or, "Grandpa, my rent's a little short this month, just 100. I'll pay you back next week. Promise." It seemed harmless enough at the time. He was family. You help family, right? That's what I'd always believed. The amounts were small, easily absorbed. I had my pension, my savings. I was comfortable, or so I thought. But the requests became more frequent, the amounts larger, the paybacks. Those became rarer and rarer, eventually disappearing altogether, always with a new excuse, a new hard luck story. Then he started talking about my finances. He'd see my bank statements lying on the kitchen table. "How is Grandpa?" he'd say, his tone serious, concerned. "You've got all this money just sitting in the bank. It's not working for you. Inflation's eating it up. I know this guy. He's a financial wizard. He can triple it in 6 months. Guaranteed." I was old-fashioned. The bank was safe, solid. I understood banks. My father's words about preparedness echoed. But Kevin was persistent, so very persistent. He'd show me fancy brochures with graphs and charts that made my head spin. He'd bring up websites on his little pocket computer thing, full of glowing testimonials and promises of incredible returns. He spoke a language of finance I didn't understand, all jargon and buzzwords, but he sounded so confident, so knowledgeable. He made it sound like I was being foolish, letting my hard-earned money stagnate. Slowly, subtly, he started to take over. He suggested he could help me manage my bills, my accounts. "It's too much for you to worry about, Grandpa," he'd say, patting my shoulder. "You should be relaxing, enjoying your retirement. Let me take this burden off your shoulders." He'd say I was getting forgetful, mixing things up, though I wasn't, not really, not then. Maybe a little slower, but my mind was still sharp. But he said it so often, with such conviction that a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in my own mind. Was I losing it? He'd bring papers for me to sign. "Just routine bank stuff, Grandpa. Just an authorization for me to talk to the investment guy for you." He'd riffle through them quickly, point to a line. "Sign here." And I, like a fool, I trusted him. He was my flesh and blood, my Sarah's boy, the grandson Martha had adored. How could I not trust him? The day the world fell out from under me is seared into my memory. It was a Wednesday, I think. My old water heater had finally given up the ghost, clanking and groaning its last. I needed a new one, and I knew it wouldn't be cheap. I drove down to the Oak Ridge Savings and Loan, the same bank I'd used for over 50 years, walked up to Mrs. Peterson's window. She'd been a teller there since she was a girl. "Morning, Robert," she said, her usual cheerful greeting. "Come to raid the coffers." I chuckled, slid my passbook across the counter. "Just need to get a new water heater, Mary. Seems the old one decided to retire." She opened the book, tapped a few keys on her computer. Her smile faltered. She frowned, tapped some more. A strange look came over her face, a mixture of confusion and pity. My stomach gave a little lurch. "Is something wrong, Mary?" I asked, my voice suddenly a bit shaky. She looked up at me, her eyes full of a sorrow I didn't understand yet. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Say, Robert, there's almost nothing left." The floor just dropped out from under me. I swear, the patterned linoleum of that bank lobby tilted and swayed. I had to grip the counter to stay upright. What do you mean, nothing left?" I stammered. "Go, there should be. There's over $100,000 in that account. My life savings, Martha's, our savings." She slowly turned her computer screen towards me. The number displayed there was so small, so insignificant, it barely registered. A few $100. Not enough for a water heater. Not enough for anything. I felt hollow, utterly and completely hollow. Sick. A cold dread washed over me. Colder than any winter Oak Ridge had ever thrown at us. How could this be? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. And then, a name. Kevin. It wasn't just that savings account. He hadn't just borrowed from it. He'd systematically emptied everything. My checking account, my modest investment portfolio, the one he'd convinced me to transfer to his wizard friend. He'd forged my signature on withdrawal slips, dozens of them, small amounts at first, then larger and larger. He'd taken out credit cards in my name, cards I never knew existed, and maxed them all out, my life savings. Decades of hard work, of scrimping and saving, of denying myself small pleasures so Martha and I could have security in our old age, gone, vanished into thin air, or rather, into Kevin's pockets. Over $100,000, every penny. The world went grey. Mrs. Peterson was saying something, offering me a chair, a glass of water. But her voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I stumbled out of the bank, clutching that nearly empty passbook. The bright sunshine outside felt like an accusation. How could the world look so normal when mine had just imploded? There was shame, too, a burning, suffocating shame. How could I have been so stupid, so blind, so trusting, an old fool? That's what I was. An easy mark. It wasn't just the money, though God knows that was devastating enough. It was the trust. He'd stolen that too, shattered it into a million irreparable pieces, and that, in many ways, hurt even more. I felt utterly helpless, adrift in a sea of betrayal. An old fool, conned by his own grandson. The first thing I did when I got home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial, was try to call Kevin. His phone went straight to voicemail, a cheerful, cocky message that made my blood boil. "Hey, you've reached Kevin. Leave a message or don't whatever." I left a message, my voice hoarse, demanding he call me. Demanding an explanation. He never called back. The next day, I drove to the small rundown apartment he rented in the next town over. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. Empty, cleared out. A few bits of trash on the floor, a dirty coffee cup on the counter. He'd vanished, just like the money, telling Sarah. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. Harder than burying my own wife. I called her that evening. I could barely get the words out. She listened in stunned silence as I choked out the whole sordid story. Then came the sobs, heartbroken, gut-wrenching sobs that tore through me. She was devastated, not just for me, but by the betrayal of her own son. "So, Dad, no," she kept saying over and over. "Not Kevin. How could he? How could he do this to you, to us? She cried for days, I think. She wanted to confront him, to wring his neck, she said. But he was gone, disappeared off the face of the earth as far as we knew. She tried to help, of course, sent what little money she could spare, but she had her own family, her own mortgage, her own struggles. It wasn't her fault, not a bit of it. But the guilt ate at her. I know it did. She felt responsible for the son she'd raised. I thought about going to the police. I really did. I sat there in my armchair for hours, the phone in my hand, staring at the number for the local sheriff's office. But the shame, it was like a lead weight. Admitting to the whole town that my own grandson had fleeced me, made a fool of me. And what would they do, really? He was long gone. It would be a report filed, a case number assigned. And then, nothing. Dust gathering in a file cabinet. And a part of me, a foolish, sentimental old part, still clung to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd come to his senses. Maybe he'd realize the enormity of what he'd done and come back, hat in hand, money in tow. What a naive old man I truly was. That hope was a cruel delusion. The reality of my situation set in with brutal speed. My monthly pension, which had always been enough to supplement my savings and allow for a comfortable, if modest, life, now barely covered the mortgage on this old house and the basic utilities. The savings, the cushion I'd painstakingly built over a lifetime, were meant for things like property taxes, for unexpected repairs like that broken water heater, for medical bills that Medicare didn't fully cover, for living, for dignity in my old age. All gone. I didn't want to tell anyone else in Oak Ridge, my friends, my neighbors, the folks at church. The shame was too great, too raw. So I withdrew. I stopped going to my Wednesday morning coffee with the boys at the diner. I made excuses when Mrs. Henderson from next door invited me over for supper. I became a hermit in my own home, the walls closing in on me. The isolation was a heavy blanket, suffocating, and with the isolation came a terrifying vulnerability. Suddenly, every bill that arrived in the mail was a crisis. Every unexpected expense, a catastrophe. The pharmacy called. My prescription refills were ready. My heart medication, the beta blockers that kept my rhythm steady, the pills for my arthritis, which was starting to gnaw at my joints with a vengeance, the blood pressure tablets. I went down there to Henderson's pharmacy. Old man Henderson had retired, but his son, young Tom, ran it now. He looked at my list, then at me, a troubled expression on his face. "That'll be $187, Mr. Johnson," he said, not unkindly. I reached into my pocket. I had $63 and some change, $63 to last me till my next pension check. That's when it hit me, the stark, brutal choice, food or medicine. It's a choice no one should ever have to make. Not in a country as prosperous as this one. It's a choice that strips away your dignity, layer by painful layer. I stood there in that pharmacy, the brightly lit aisles suddenly seeming to mock me with their abundance. The scent of antiseptic and sweet cough drops filled my nostrils. Young Tom Henderson was looking at me with concern, waiting. "Mr. Johnson," he said gently, "which ones will it be this month? Perhaps we can do a partial on some." I had to pick. I chose the heart medication. "Can't let the old ticker give out just yet," I tried to joke, but the words felt like ashes in my mouth. The arthritis pills, the blood pressure meds. They'd have to wait. I'd go home and eat bread and water. Sometimes just water. Or I'd skip meals altogether. The hunger pains were bad, a dull, constant ache in my belly, but the thought of my heart giving out, that sudden, final betrayal by my own body, that was worse. The arthritis, unchecked, flared up with a vengeance. My knuckles swelled. My knees screamed with every step. Getting out of bed in the morning became an ordeal. Bending down to tie my shoes was an exercise in agony. I was fading. Slowly, surely, I was withering away, a prisoner of my own pride and my grandson's greed. Kevin, he'd been so smooth, so convincing. Always had an answer, a plausible explanation for everything. Always made it sound like he was doing me a favor, looking out for my best interests. "Don't you worry your old head about this, Grandpa, I got it," he'd say with that disarming smile. He preyed on my love for him, on my innate desire to see my grandson succeed, to believe in him. He knew which buttons to push. He knew my soft spots. And the impact on Sarah, it was like a slow poison. The betrayal by her son, coupled with her father's suffering and her inability to fix it, it nearly destroyed her. I could hear it in her voice every time we spoke, that undercurrent of pain and helplessness. It put a terrible strain on her marriage, on everything. And me, I started doubting everyone. Every knock on the door made me jump. Every friendly voice on the phone seemed to hide an ulterior motive. Was the man from the power company really just reading the meter? Or was he sizing up my vulnerability? Was the nice lady from the church offering a casserole out of kindness? Or did she know? Did she pity me? The trust I'd once had in the basic goodness of people, that too was a casualty of Kevin's theft. I was becoming a bitter, suspicious old man. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly, because the garbage trucks always came on Tuesdays, their noisy rumbling a familiar part of the week's rhythm. I'd run out of my heart medication 2 days before. My pension check wasn't due for another week. I'd tried to stretch the pills, taking half doses, then quarter doses, until there were none left. I woke up that morning feeling a tightness in my chest, a strange fluttering, like a trapped bird beating its wings against my ribs. I was weak, dizzy from not eating properly for weeks. I managed to drag myself out of bed, my joints screaming in protest, and shuffled to the bathroom. I caught my reflection in the dusty mirror over the sink. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. He was a ghost. Gaunt, his skin papery and pale, stretched tight over his cheekbones. His eyes were sunk deep into their sockets, dull and lifeless, surrounded by dark, bruised-looking circles. And in that moment, a chilling thought clear as a bell pierced through the fog of my misery. This is it. This is how I die. Cheated, starved and forgotten in my own home. Alone. That image and that stark realization of my own impending, pathetic end, it was like a brutal slap in the face. It shocked me more than the empty bank account, more than the hunger. And then, right behind that wave of despair, something else stirred. A flicker. A tiny, unexpected spark of something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not the helpless, despairing kind of anger I'd felt before, but a cold, hard, clarifying rage. He wasn't going to win. Kevin, that thieving, heartless boy, was not going to be the author of my final chapter. Martha wouldn't have wanted that. She'd have fought like a lioness. Sarah wouldn't want it. And damn it, deep down, beneath all the layers of shame and pain and resignation, I didn't want that. Not like this. I decided right then and there, standing in that cold bathroom, staring at that pathetic reflection, I wasn't going to fade away. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to fight. Not for the money, not primarily. That felt like a lost cause, water under a very distant bridge. But I was going to fight for my dignity, for my life, for the right to look myself in the mirror and not see a beaten old fool. My plan wasn't grand or elaborate. How could it be? I had nothing. It started small, with the most basic instinct, survival. I had to find a way to eat, to get my medicine. And then I'd figure out how to find Kevin, not for revenge, not exactly. I wasn't a vengeful man, but for accountability. He needed to face what he'd done, not just to me, but to himself, to his mother. And I, Robert Johnson, his grandfather, needed to be the one to make him face it. The fear was still there, of course. It gnawed at the edges of my resolve. I was old, sick, broke. What could I possibly do? But it wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was different. It was fuel. The crushing helplessness that had been my constant companion for months began to recede. Replaced by a grim, stubborn determination, I was an old man, yes, frail. But I wasn't dead yet. I'd worked hard my whole life. I'd faced hardship before, the war, lean farming years, Martha's illness. This was just another battle, albeit a different kind, a more insidious enemy. It felt like waking up from a long, suffocating nightmare. The world outside my dusty windows looked a little sharper, the colors a bit brighter. I had a purpose again, however daunting, however uncertain. Finding Kevin. What if he was dangerous now? Desperate people do desperate things. What if he'd fallen in with a bad crowd with all that stolen money? What if he just laughed in my face? What if I couldn't even find him? If he'd truly vanished? The risks were many, and my resources were practically non-existent. I had no money to hire a detective, no connections in low places. My health was failing rapidly, but I had my mind, what was left of it after weeks of malnutrition and stress. It was still there, still capable of thinking, of planning. I had my old service training, buried deep under decades of civilian life, but still there. Discipline, observation, the ability to endure. And I had a lifetime of knowing how the world worked, at least the small-town part of it, the part where people still talked, where reputations mattered. And most importantly, I had Sarah. I knew if I finally broke down and told her the full extent of my desperation, the fight I'd found in myself, she'd help any way she could, even if it was just moral support from afar, or her modern internet savvy that was a mystery to me. I wasn't entirely alone, not if I chose not to be. That was the first shift. The very first thing I did, the absolute hardest step, was swallow my pride. That damned pride had been my companion and my jailer for too long. It had kept me isolated in my suffering. I walked, slowly, painfully, down to the First Presbyterian Church on Elm Street, the one Martha and I used to attend every Sunday, rain or shine. I hadn't been in months, not since the money disappeared. I felt like a hypocrite, showing up only when I needed something. Pastor Allen was a good man, younger than me, but with kind eyes that held no judgment. I sat in his small, cluttered office, the smell of old books and lemon pledge polish in the air, and I told him, not everything, not the full, shameful story of Kevin's betrayal, but enough. I told him I was in dire straits, that I was having trouble making ends meet, that my health was suffering. My voice cracked. It was humiliating, but he didn't judge. He just listened, nodded, his expression full of compassion. He arranged for food parcels from the church pantry, a lifeline of canned goods and pasta that felt like gourmet fare. More importantly, he connected me with a social worker, a kind, efficient woman named Mrs. Davies. She helped me apply for emergency aid, navigated the bureaucratic maze that I would have been lost in, and somehow, miraculously, got my prescriptions covered temporarily through a state program. Food in my belly and my vital medications back in my system, it was like a fog lifting from my brain. I could think clearly again. With that immediate crisis averted, with the gnawing hunger appeased and the fluttering in my chest calmed by the proper pills, my thoughts turned to Kevin. Where would a young man with a sudden windfall of stolen cash go? He wasn't the type to invest it wisely, to build a future. To know Kevin liked flash. He liked to impress. Fast cars, easy women, the thrill of gambling. He'd mentioned Las Vegas once, a long, long time ago, in a wistful, daydreaming sort of way. A pipe dream for a broke young man. Or maybe not so much of a pipe dream anymore, now that he had my life savings to burn through. I called Sarah. I told her what I was thinking. I told her about the spark of fight I'd found. She was scared for me, terrified. I could hear it in her voice. "Dad, please," she begged. "Don't do anything reckless. You're not well. Let the police handle it now. We can file a proper report." But I had to see his face. I had to look him in the eye. It was something I needed to do for myself. Besides, what could the police do without knowing where he was? Sarah, despite her fears, understood that stubborn streak in me, the one she'd inherited. She remembered some of Kevin's old online friends, his gaming buddies he used to talk about. She started digging online, using those social media platforms, those intricate webs of connection that were a complete mystery to me. She became my unlikely digital detective. Weeks turned into months. It was a slow, frustrating process. Lots of dead ends. Kevin was smart enough or lucky enough to cover his tracks well, at least initially. The money I'd lost, that huge sum, felt like an insurmountable mountain between me and finding him. There were days my body screamed at me to stop, to just give up and rest. The arthritis in my hands made it difficult to even hold a pen. My knees ached with every step I took, searching local haunts he used to frequent, just on the off chance he was still nearby. But that image of myself in the mirror, that gaunt, defeated old man, and the cold anger that followed, It kept me going. It was a bitter fuel, but it burned hot. The aid Mrs. Davies had arranged was temporary, a stopgap. To survive, to keep the lights on, to fund my quiet investigation, I had to sell things. Martha's old china, the set her mother had given her, each plate painted with delicate roses, some of the antique furniture we'd collected over the years, her wedding ring, which I'd kept in a small velvet box by my bedside. Each piece sold was like giving away a small piece of my heart, a tangible memory. But it bought me time. It bought me bus fare to check out leads in nearby towns, leads that always turned cold. Then one evening Sarah called. Her voice was different, tense with a suppressed excitement. "Dad," she said, "I think I found something." Something real. One of Kevin's old online friends, a young man with a penchant for posting every detail of his life online, had uploaded a new batch of photos from a recent trip, and there, in one of them, was Kevin. Grinning like a Cheshire cat, sunglasses perched on his head, leaning against a flashy red sports car that must have cost a fortune. And in the background, unmistakable, was the garish, glittering sign of a well-known Las Vegas casino. The date stamp on the photo was just 3 days old. Las Vegas, clear as day. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew then, with absolute certainty, I had to go. Sarah begged me not to. "Dad, it's too dangerous. It's Las Vegas. You'll be all alone. What if he sees you? What if he hurts you? Let me call the police there, give them the photo." But my mind was made up. This was my fight. I had to see his face when he saw me. I had to deliver that reckoning myself. I took the last of the money from the sale of Martha's grandmother's rocking chair and bought a one-way bus ticket to Las Vegas, Nevada. It was the biggest, most desperate gamble of my entire life, far bigger than any bet Kevin was likely making at the casino tables. Las Vegas, it was like stepping onto another planet. I got off that bus stiff and sore after 2 days of rattling travel, into a wall of desert heat and noise and flashing lights. It was an assault on the senses. Loud, bright, overwhelming, a city that never slept, fueled by dreams and desperation. I'm an old man from quiet Oak Ridge. I felt like a minnow in a shark tank, completely out of my element. I found a cheap, changed, run-down motel room off the main strip, the kind where you didn't look too closely at the bedspread. And then I started walking. I went from casino to casino, a faded photograph of Kevin clutched in my trembling hand. The opulence was sickening. The endless rows of slot machines chirping and ringing, the hushed intensity of the poker tables, the strained, hopeful faces of the gamblers. I showed Kevin's photo to bored-looking security guards, to cocktail waitresses, to change attendants. Most of them brushed me off, gave me a cursory glance and a shake of the head. "Lots of guys look like that, Pops." Can't help you. I was just another anonymous old man, easily dismissed, but I was persistent. I had Martha's stubbornness in me, and my father's endurance. Days of walking, my feet swollen, my back aching, hope dwindling with every casino I entered and left. The sheer scale of the city, the anonymity of the crowds, it was disheartening. He could be anywhere. He could have left already. And then, on the 4th day, I saw him. It was late afternoon. I was in one of the mega casinos, a place so vast it felt like its own city. My eyes were gritty with fatigue, my spirit at a low ebb. I was about to give up, to admit defeat. I was scanning the crowded floor, a sea of faces, and then, there, across the room, amidst the clatter and the smoke, at a high-stakes poker table, Kevin. He was laughing, a loud, careless sound that grated on my nerves, leaning back in his chair, a drink in one hand, a pile of chips in front of him. Throwing those chips onto the table like they were nothing, like they were confetti. My money, my life, my Martha's legacy. Something inside me snapped. All the pain, the hunger, the shame, the humiliation, the weeks of fear and despair, it all coalesced into a single, white-hot point of cold fury. I started walking towards that table. My legs, which had felt so weak and shaky for months, suddenly felt steady, strong. My vision narrowed, focused only on him. The noise of the casino faded to a dull roar. I reached the table. He was raking in a pot, a smug look on his face. "Kevin," I said. My voice didn't tremble. It wasn't loud. It was flat. Deadly. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. His eyes met mine. The color drained from his face as if a tap had been opened. That charming, cocksure smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, slack-jawed shock. He saw a ghost. My ghost. The ghost of the grandfather he'd robbed and left for dead. He tried to bluster, to recover. "Grandpa," he stammered, his voice suddenly high-pitched. What are you doing here?" But his eyes darted around, looking for an escape route, like a cornered rat. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse him loudly. Didn't make a scene for the other players, not yet. I just looked at him, let him see the depth of what he'd done reflected in my eyes. "You stole my life, Kevin," I said, my voice still low, but carrying the weight of all my suffering. "You left me to starve, and now I'm here. To take a piece of it back, or see you pay for what you did." The other players at the table went quiet, sensing the raw, dangerous undercurrent. Kevin started to push his chair back, to get up, to run. He was younger, faster, but I was fueled by an old man's righteous fury. I was surprisingly quick. I grabbed his arm, my grip like iron despite the arthritis. He tried to pull away, his eyes wide with panic now. "Let go of me, old man," he hissed. That's when casino security stepped in. 2 large men in crisp uniforms materialized beside us. They'd likely been watching me. This strange old man methodically searching their casino for days. Maybe they'd seen the photograph I'd been showing. Maybe they just had a nose for trouble when it was about to explode. "Everything all right here, gentlemen?" one of them asked, his voice calm but firm. They separated us. Kevin immediately started protesting his innocence, babbling about a crazy old relative. I, on the other hand, was surprisingly calm. I told my story, quietly, clearly. I laid out the facts, the dates, the amounts. I'd had the foresight, thanks to Sarah's insistence, to bring a folder with me. It contained copies of bank statements, showing the unauthorized withdrawals, copies of the forged signatures that Sarah had managed to obtain from a sympathetic bank employee back in Oak Ridge, copies of the credit card statements for debts I'd never incurred. Proof. Kevin blustered, denied everything vehemently. "He's confused. He's senile," he shouted, but his panic was obvious, his story full of holes. The security guards listened patiently. Then one of them picked up a phone. They called the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. It felt like an eternity, waiting there under the cold, indifferent gaze of the casino lights, with Kevin alternating between frantic denials and sullen silence. Then the police officers arrived. I told my story again. They listened. They looked at my documents. They questioned Kevin. His story kept changing. They ran his name through their system. I don't know what they found, but it was enough. They arrested him, right there in the middle of that glittering, soulless casino. Fraud, grand larceny, elder abuse. The works. Watching them put him in handcuffs, reading him his rights. That young man who carried my blood, my daughter's son. It wasn't triumph I felt, not the fist-pumping victory I might have imagined. It was a profound, bone-deep sadness, and mixed with it, a small, weary sense of relief. It was over. That particular battle, at least, was over. The immediate aftermath was a blur of police stations, statements, and bureaucratic procedures. I had to give my testimony several times. They were professional, even kind, especially after they understood the full scope of Kevin's betrayal. Sarah, when I called her with the news, cried with a mixture of relief and fresh grief. She flew out to Las Vegas the next day. She held my hand, cried some more, apologized endlessly for Kevin. Though none of it was her fault, her presence was a comfort, a reminder that not all family ties were broken. But what now? That was the big question hanging in the stale air of my cheap motel room. The bulk of the money was gone, gambled away, frittered away on a lifestyle Kevin couldn't sustain. There would be a trial, legal proceedings. It would be long, messy, and painful. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained to my very core. The fight had taken everything I had. Sarah wouldn't let me go back to my empty house in Oak Ridge alone, not right away. And honestly, I didn't want to. The thought of that silent house, those rooms filled with ghosts and bitter memories, was unbearable. So I stayed with her and her family for a few months. Her husband, Tom, was a good man, quiet and steady. He welcomed me without fuss. It was different, being cared for, having meals cooked for me, someone to ask if I'd taken my medication. I wasn't used to it, this feeling of dependence, however kind, but it was what I needed, time to heal, to gather my scattered wits. The legal process, when it finally began, was as hard as I'd anticipated. Seeing Kevin in court, pale and diminished in a prison jumpsuit, was a fresh torment. He looked so young, so lost. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd held my hand and looked up at me with trusting eyes. Then I remembered the cold calculation of his crimes, the suffering he'd inflicted, and the flicker of sympathy died. He pleaded guilty eventually, to a lesser charge, to avoid a longer sentence. A deal was struck. He got a few years in prison. Not enough, some people might say. Perhaps they're right, but he was punished. He faced a consequence. And for me, that had to be enough. The nightmares didn't stop overnight just because he was locked away. For a long time, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the feeling of betrayal still fresh, the image of that empty bank book burning behind my eyelids, the mistrust of people, especially strangers who were too friendly too fast, that lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. So I'd flinch internally if someone I didn't know well offered to help me, my mind immediately jumping to suspicion. Healing, I learned, isn't a straight line. It's a winding, bumpy road, full of potholes and unexpected detours. Sometimes you feel like you're making progress, and then something, a stray comment, a familiar scent, will send you tumbling back into the darkness for a while. Some of the money was recovered, a pitifully small amount that the authorities managed to seize before he'd squandered it all. It wasn't enough to make a real difference. I had to sell my house in Oak Ridge. That was a deep pang, a sharp sorrow. So many memories were tied up in those old walls. Martha's laughter, Sarah's first steps, decades of quiet, ordinary life. But I couldn't afford to keep it on my meager pension. The property taxes alone would have buried me. So with a heavy heart, I signed the papers and watched a young family full of hopes and dreams move into the home that had been mine for over 50 years. I moved into a small, two-bedroom apartment in a senior complex, much closer to Sarah and her family. It was practical. It was sensible. But it wasn't home, not in the way Oak Ridge had been. But slowly, very slowly, things began to change. My bond with Sarah, already strong, deepened into something even more profound. We'd been through the fire together, and it had forged a new kind of understanding between us. She became my rock, my confidant, my fiercest protector. Her husband, Tom, was a constant, quiet support. And then there were Sarah's other children, my younger grandchildren, Lily and Sam. They were wary of me at first, this sad, quiet old man who'd suddenly appeared in their lives. But kids, they have a way of breaking down walls without even trying. Their uncomplicated affection, their innocent laughter, their endless questions about Grandpa Robert's stories, the old good ones, not the recent painful ones, they started to fill the empty, aching spaces in my heart. Lily would crawl into my lap with a picture book, and Sam would want to show me his latest Lego creation. They were a balm to my wounded soul. In my new apartment complex, there were other seniors. Many, like me, were widowed, living on fixed incomes, each with their own stories of joy and sorrow. We started a little coffee club, meeting once a week in the communal lounge. We'd share stories, recipes, complaints about our aching joints. I learned I wasn't the only one who'd faced hardship, betrayal, loneliness. It helped knowing that. It made me feel less like an island. The biggest achievement, looking back, wasn't finding Kevin or seeing him jailed. It was finding a measure of peace within myself. Learning to sleep through the night again without the ghosts of the past haunting my dreams. Enjoying a simple meal without that gnawing fear of where the next one would come from. These were my victories, small perhaps to the outside world, but monumental to me. I started to find joy in small things again. I planted a little herb garden on my tiny balcony, rosemary, thyme, basil. The scent of them in the morning sun was a small comfort. I rediscovered my love for reading, devouring books from the local library. Watching my younger grandkids play soccer on a Saturday morning, their shouts of exuberance echoing in the crisp air. These became my treasures, the simple, precious moments that made life worth living again. I learned that true strength isn't about never falling, never being broken. It's about getting up one more time than you fall. It's about piecing yourself back together, even if the cracks still show. I learned that asking for help, something my pride had forbidden for so long, isn't weakness. It's a profound act of courage. Money, I realized, comes and goes. It's paper. It's numbers. But trust, once broken, especially by someone you love, is damn hard to mend. Sometimes it can never be fully restored. And family can be your greatest joy and your deepest, most profound sorrow. Sometimes, tragically, in the very same person. I worry about Lily and Sam's, of course. What grandparent doesn't? I want to shield them from all the harshness and cruelty the world can dish out. But I also want them to be strong, to be resilient, to be discerning. I try to teach them the value of honesty, of kindness, of hard work, not through lectures, because kids rarely listen to those, but by how I try to live my life now, by the stories I choose to tell them. Kevin got out of prison a couple of years ago. He tried to contact me once. He sent a letter, forwarded through Sarah. It was full of apologies, remorse, and promises to make amends. I read it. Then I put it away. I don't know if his words were genuine, if prison had changed him, or if it was just another manipulation. Forgiveness is a complex thing, isn't it? A tangled knot. Maybe one day I'll find it in my heart, but not yet. Some wounds run too deep, leave scars too tender to touch. Sarah keeps her distance from him too. That's her choice, her own pain to manage. I don't interfere. So here I am, back on a porch swing, though this one's smaller, newer, on my little apartment balcony. The sun's a bit higher in the sky now than when I started telling you all this. The coffee in my mug has gone cold, but I feel lighter, as if a great weight has been lifted, just by speaking these words aloud, by sharing this burden. What have I learned from all this, you ask? So many things. I've learned that evil, or if not evil, then profound selfishness and cruelty, can wear a familiar face, a beloved face even. That trust is as precious and as fragile as a butterfly's wing. That an old dog can indeed learn new tricks, or at least remember the old ones when his life depends on it. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that even in the darkest of times, when you think you've got nothing left, there's often a flicker of fight still burning deep inside you, if you just look hard enough for it, if you're desperate enough to fan that ember back into a flame. Don't let shame silence you, that's a big one. If you're struggling, if someone has wronged you, if you're hurting, reach out. Don't carry that burden alone like I did for so long. There are good people in the world. Sometimes they're strangers, like Pastor Allen or Mrs. Davies. Sometimes they're the family you least expect, or the family you thought you'd lost, but they're out there. I told you this story, this long, hard, painful story, not for your pity. I'm past needing pity, but I told it because secrets fester. They grow in the dark and poison you from the inside out. And because if just one person, somewhere out there, hears my old voice and finds the courage to ask for help, or to stand up for themselves when they've been wronged, or to recognize the warning signs before it's too late, then my suffering, my fight, it wasn't all for nothing. Then some good will have come from all that bad. If you're facing betrayal, especially from someone you love, someone you trust implicitly, know this: it is not your fault. Their actions, their choices, those are their own. You have a right to be safe, to be respected, to live with dignity. And you have a right to fight for that with every ounce of strength you possess. And please, look out for your elders. We're not all as dottery and helpless as some might think, but we can be vulnerable. Don't assume they're fine just because they say they are. Ask the hard questions gently. Be present in their lives. A little attention, a little care. It can make all the difference. It can be a lifeline. If this story, my story, touched you in some way, if it resonated with you, please do hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Maybe share it with someone who you think might need to hear it. Every little bit helps these stories travel, helps them find the people they're meant to reach. And leave a comment below. Let me know you were here, listening. It means more than you can possibly know to an old man with a story to tell, sitting on his balcony swing. It makes me feel a little less alone with these memories. I'm Robert Johnson. I'm a survivor. I lost a lot. My savings, my home, my innocence about the nature of some people. But in that terrible crucible, I found myself again. I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. And that, in the end, is a victory of its own kind. It's not the life I planned, not the peaceful retirement Martha and I dreamed of, but it's my life, and I'm living it. One day, one creaky porch swing, one cup of coffee at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share my burden and my fight. It's been good to talk.